Dr. Rob Kossler, who is the chair of MISD, Management Information Systems and Entrepreneurship. And you'll really enjoy his interactive learning session that he's going to do. He's done the last couple of years. And so I'll let you take it away. You want to say anything else about yourself? You said the son graduated from Mississippi State.
Yeah.
And another one
At Linfield, finishing up his second year, so.
So he's a family man as well. That one that played in a soccer tournament in Spain.
Yeah. So it's fun chasing your kids all over here and back. But, thank you for being here. Like Bernie said, I am department chair for Management Information Systems and Entrepreneurship. But primarily, I am an information systems faculty member, and I am the primary person who teaches the cybersecurity class that we teach here at the College of Business. We have a singular security class and try to cover a lot of things. So it's a class where we go not terribly deep in anything very technical, but broadly, so people are well prepared to enter the marketplace, able to participate in the conversation. And so what I want to share today is one of the activities that I do that I think is a good way to engage with this conversation. But before I do, I wanted to share with you a little bit about why. And when you think about what the purpose of a business is, and I'm going to simplify this, and we could argue that there's more to it than that, but at the end of the day, it's to make money, right? If I told you that you could spend $1 million and you could get $5 back, a lot of you would be all like, I'm not giving you that $1 million. And so if you think about a business, they're, hopefully, if they spend $1 million, they're getting $5 million back, not $5. So when it comes to making security decisions, a lot of what we're talking about is we've got something that we do to make a profit. But there are adversaries out there, there are people out there, there are events that occur that prevent me from doing what it is that the business is supposed to do. And so how do we look at the value of what we're getting compared to the risk or the cost of what it could prevent or it could cause and those sorts of things? So putting you into that framework, we need to decide, is it worth it? And so a couple of things that we want to think about when we talk about these things are the idea of risks, threats, and vulnerabilities. So a risk is the likelihood that something bad will happen. So let's keep that in mind. How likely is it that Washington State University is going to be hit by a tornado?
Not very likely.
Not very likely. It's very low. What about the likelihood that there will be a power outage at some point and things will go down? That's a little bit higher, right? What is the likelihood that somebody will walk into this room and walk away with a desktop computer? That might be a little bit higher, right? We can identify these different risks. We can assign likelihoods to them. The threat is that damage that would happen. If someone walks in and takes out a computer, there's a loss there. If there's a tornado and it tears down buildings, even bigger loss. Thankfully, we don't live in tornado country. But what happened in 1980? Anyone remember? Anyone know? I guess remember is the wrong question. Bernie?
Yeah,
Mount St. Helens blew up, right? And there was unexpected, rather, it was damage that occurred, right? It had work to do to get things back up and running. These sorts of things happen. How do we plan ahead for them? How are we ready to happen? Or how are we prepared to deal with them? And then vulnerabilities are weaknesses that allows the threat to be realized or to have an effect on an asset. So how vulnerable are we to that thing happening? If we shut and lock these doors all the time and we have to have a key card to come into this room, we have just lowered the vulnerability of someone coming in here and grabbing a computer and going out the door. If we leave the doors open at all times, it's not monitored and we're very open and freeing and whatever, our vulnerability just went up, right? So the decisions, the things that are in place are to hopefully lower these vulnerabilities. So I want to, I should not say Internet of Things. I forgot to change the title. I changed this question from Internet of Things to generative AI. So assume the top thing says generative AI. And what I want you all to do is to go ahead and break up into groups in just a minute. And I want you to think about generative AI. So ChatGPT, we're familiar with that, but there's lots of different types of generative AI technology. So I don't necessarily want you to anchor on ChatGPT, but think about a particular generative AI technology, maybe two, that your group identifies and think about what are the benefits that it gives you as an organization. So maybe even, well, we can talk about it individually. Because a lot of those will carry to organizations. What are the benefits it gives you, but what are the risks that come along? So in your groups of 2 to 3 people, I want you to identify, write on the top piece of paper, punch it into your smartphone, however you're taking notes today. What is the generative AI technology? And then maybe 3 benefits and 3 risks that come along with it. And then you'll tell me about them and we'll go from there. But as you identify those benefits, right next to it, who receives that benefit? And when it comes to the risk, who is affected by that risk? So go ahead and make those notes and we'll come back here in about, I don't know, 3-4 minutes.
Okay, so obviously like Chad or like Connor. Oh, Meredith. Dan, okay, nice to meet you. Are you like dental patient? Cool.
Second one,
Okay, so you take a few seconds. Probably in the fall. Cool. Okay, so the 3 types would be like Chad and Far.
So, yeah. We were checking from what I'm seeing. Version of.
It's like ChatGPT basically.
Okay, so like a chat for me.
Yeah, it's like the beat word.
Okay, cool. And you just like what I've seen.
Yeah.
For some reason.
The second one.
Okay, that's what it's called. I've seen funny stuff. Like funny
I think we should just discuss like what we have.
Yeah, I just like.
ChatGPT.
Okay, so the benefits would be like increased functionality, increased productivity, and greater services.
Benefits.
Yeah. More like. Exact.
Helps us.
These are like the answers. Another thing is like ability to like. Yeah.
Well, I use ChatGPT sometimes
Okay, well,
there's.
one challenge that I just
Like
came
one
across
topic
that I found
for
really
ChatGPT, there's a
so like.
You can write a graph. That's like a challenge.
That's also.
I to like tech job. Or job.
Like it's equivalent to like.
Not like. More questions.
Like how much hours.
But
But like a challenge.
Only to me. Like there are huge. I know.
Yeah. Sometimes he asks ChatGPT a question and he knows the answer.
All right, sounds like the room's quieting down. So while I walk back to the front, decide who your spokesperson is and I will pick on you. All right. Normally, if I asked for volunteers, the people in the front row would raise their hand. That's what history has told me in this room. So I'm gonna start over here in the back corner, and then I'm gonna go over here to this back corner, and then we'll come over here. So what technology did this back corner select? Okay, Chat GPT, the low-hanging fruit. I heard a lot of people talking about Chat GPT. Let's see. Okay. What are the benefits? Just give me a couple. What are the benefits you get from Chat GPT?
So for one of us, we said it was like a 24/7 available tutor, so if you did really understand your concept that we had in like class,
Uh-huh,
you can always actually check GPT, hey, can you explain like this concept
okay, and who benefits from that?
ourselves?
Ourselves, or a student perhaps in a classroom, if we're to generalize a little bit from there, so, the student benefiting. What else? Student, if I can spell, okay. What other benefits do you get from ChatGPT? Yeah.
It saves time by doing work for you.
Oh, it's gonna make us more efficient. Wonderful. I love being more efficient. I actually had it create a slide deck once for me from a research paper, and it was bad, but it did save me the time of actually creating the initial version of my PowerPoint slide deck. But it did save me a little bit of time on the front end. What are the risks? Yeah.
Its output could be wrong, as you're just saying.
It might be wrong. How do I know if I can trust those results? I mean, if you blindly trust, I mean, think about this. Let's assume that your boss asks you to give them a report about something, and you're like, I want to be efficient. Here's my prompt to ChatGPT, and I get it, and I look at it, and I'm like, you know what? That sounds really, really good. I'm gonna give it to my boss. And then your boss gets in front of his boss, and he starts sharing this report, and all of a sudden he realizes everything is incredibly wrong, though it sounds very, very good. It can hallucinate, it can be wrong. You have to know that, there's something. So in that case, your boss might be embarrassed, and at the end of the day, you're the person that relied on it to create that data, may find yourself not in a job or being reprimanded or something because you took the easy way out, the more efficient way out. Other risks. Yeah.
If you're using authority, it could have unintentional things that we don't.
All right, so there might be bugs in the code. How do I know that it did things correctly? You have to know how to program at some level to be able to review what it gave you, because it could make you more efficient. But if it's more efficient and there's something wrong in it, that could be problematic. And you have to be knowledgeable enough to catch those things and to not get yourself into trouble, if you will, by implementing a buggy piece of software. Who's hurt by the bug software? You got buggy software. The users,
The company you're providing.
the company we're providing the software from, right? They roll it out and, oh, there were bugs. They've got egg on their face, right? We just release software. I mean, Microsoft does it all the time, right? And we have to do our patches every Tuesday, but, probably not because of ChatGPT, but yeah.
I want to disagree with the concept of a bug.
Okay,
ChatGPT is a conversation simulator.
okay.
It doesn't mean it's simulating a a conversation that's based on fact.
Mhm.
Like I actually planned a trip for me, and apparently I want to send my wife and I to the station for a weekend.
Okay.
It's not a bug. It's doing exactly what it's meant to do. It's just people who are not understanding what it's meant to do. So there's a mental model disconnect between the users and the developers.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. So the disconnect, which means I'm getting something, if we think about a bug, it's just wrong, right? It's not what I wanted. It's not as valuable as it could have been.
But it's not a bug. Bug is when it's doing the wrong thing.
Yep.
Versus not doing what you wanted to do.
Gotcha.
I want my car to go 200 miles an hour. That doesn't mean there's a bug in my car.
Fair enough.
It means I have a bad perception of what I want the car to do. And no, I don't want to really go 200 miles an hour.
Well, you might. Ludicrous speed's kind of nice. Yeah, sorry. No, you're good.
Well, as a communications simulator, and then as it relates to cybersecurity, couldn't ChatGPT also be used to create like phishing emails or sort of like any sort of other scams or schemes that?
Yeah, so you could actually have a huge benefit, right, of writing well-crafted email communications. I will tell you, as a department chair, I do that exact thing, right? When you become a department chair, you start getting asked questions that you never think you're gonna get asked in your life. And sometimes I sit there, I'm like, how do I answer this professionally, but definitively, and having respect for the person who asked the question? And sometimes I'll hem and haw over how I'm writing that email for 20 minutes. Even though I know what the answer is going to be, it's gonna be a yes or a no, usually sort of thing, but I wanna, if I ask ChatGPT to do it for me, I have a very well-written communication in a matter of 30 seconds, and then I go through and make the voice a little bit my own, because it never quite writes words and phrases the way I do, but it saves me a lot of time and I don't spend as much time thinking about how to craft that message. But similarly, hackers could say, you know, I know something about you. I actually found your LinkedIn profile. So I know a little bit about you and I can feed what I know to the conversation agent and say, what's your name? Ian. If I were to take Ian's profile, how do I send a message to Ian that is very convincing that he should click on my link or do this thing that I want him to do? All of a sudden, the risk brought by ChatGPT is the ability to customize these messages very, very quickly, very, very easily, that are customized and tailored and written in a very professional way. One of the tricks that they always taught you for identifying spam is they're going to have misspelled words, there's gonna be typos, it's gonna sound funny. Well, introduce ChatGPT. One of the things as faculty, as we've talked about, how do you identify if a student wrote a paper with ChatGPT? And one of the conclusions that we came to is it's written too perfectly, right? Do we dock points because the person has a perfectly written paper because it somehow wasn't written themselves? So we didn't think that was quite a right way to do these sorts of things, but that's a tell. When we actually gave 5 papers, 4 written by students, 1 written by generative AI, all 4 of the student papers were A's. So most people could identify the generative AI one because it was written even better than an A-level student paper as far as the grammar and the things that were from a writing perspective. So it's really, really good, which means that it's really, really hard for organizations to help their employees to know what are those clues, what are those triggers that would say it's generated by ChatGPT. All right, anyone choose a technology that was not ChatGPT? Yeah.
Dolly.
Okay, Dolly. Yep. Made by OpenAI, but what does Dolly do for those not aware? Okay, that's it. Great images, good prompts. What are some of the benefits of that?
Can make things pretty quick, whereas you have to.
That fast, like 30 seconds, I give it a prompt and I've got a picture. Fast pictures, right? And you can iterate the heck out of that. What else?
Makes it pretty easy. Like I know a lot of the artists are complaining now that you can just give it something in an exact style and it'll recreate it.
Mm-hmm. So that's a risk for some ways for artists, because did they just lose their value because something that would take them a very long time to craft and to put together is being done that fast in a particular style and done very quickly that way. So potentially putting some risk at into the you know, these person's business, what they're doing. One of the things I found very useful about Dolly is I have a textbook that I'm co-author of, and we were arguing about what the cover should look like. And they would send it off to a graphic designer and 2 weeks later come back with something that was terrible. And then we do it again. 2 weeks later, we come back like, you're not even hearing us. So we had an hour-long meeting, and during that hour-long meeting, I created about 15 different iterations of what I thought the cover should look like, none of which were perfect, but it allowed me to express what my vision was, and for us to have a conversation and to be able to do so in a 1 hour meeting and get to the point where it's like, okay, we know what this cover is going to look like. And then they send it off to their graphic designer because they didn't want to use generative AI to create the textbook, cover and all that sort of stuff. But it worked really, really well to have that conversation and to be able to do so in a very fast manner. So one other thing that as we look at ChatGPT and generative AI that I think is an interesting risk to think about is if I give it information, if I take and I go to ChatGPT and I type in something or I give it big long text, who owns that text that I gave it? Where does it go? Where is it stored? How is it used? Is it potentially usable? Yeah, go ahead.
Used to improve ChatGPT in the computer.
It's being used to improve the model. So at some level, my benefit I'm getting from using it is being paid for with my willingness for it to train the model and for it to be part of what that database becomes. So a little bit of a privacy risk there. As I've talked to organizations, that's one of their big concerns is I don't want Microsoft, who's really coming to be highly associated with OpenAI, to have access to everything. Where's my rights to that data. So continuing this conversation, and since we don't have quite as much time, let's have this conversation together, and you're not seeing my screen anymore because I turned this off. Let's see, come back. All right, so using this technology, and Ian helped us with the whole, a person could actually take this technology and use it to craft custom messages. Let's identify some threats that can be caused by individuals that aren't, oh yeah, they got a very crafty message. So what are some things that a person could do to cause a threat to an organization? Yeah.
Suppose like someone finds like a random thumb drive in the parking lot of their organization, they plug it into their computer.
Okay, that's a threat with a random thumb drive. How does that relate to generative AI?
I guess you could use, are you saying like how generative I can?
Yes, let's listen. We did everything in ChatGPT so far. What about ChatGPT is creates an opportunity for threats that an individual could cause to happen? I think you've got some helpers right over here, and then we'll go back here.
Well, in the case of like a phishing email or a social engineering attack, like usually like a typo or weird syntax might give away that it's like somebody who's coming after you, but with ChatGPT or like any other AI, you could create a very specific and professional email that someone might be more likely to fall for.
Okay, exactly. We can, like we were talking about before, we can customize those messages, have them very specific and well written. Yeah.
And similar lines with the email, if an employee puts confidential information, like generating an email to their boss or something, unknowingly, they put something confidential in.
Right, so they might be revealing organizational secrets to Microsoft, OpenAI, whoever the provider is, and all of a sudden violate organization policy that says thou shalt not. Okay.
I know we have to mention about deepfakes and the ability to an AI that can generate just information.
Right, so going back to Dolly, and maybe this is a something beyond what Dolly would allow you to do, but it's to create deepfakes. One of the conversations I've been having with people about interesting research ideas as we enter an election campaign season is how likely is it that we're going to see things posted on social media that look very, very real, and somebody created it in about 30 seconds using the technologies that they have to create these sorts of things. Creating a deep fake of a celebrity saying a thing, or Joe Biden or Donald Trump, or something that would impact the election, that'd be close to believable, but maybe not true. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, spending on that, there are already like a lot of social media accounts that are models, but they're all AI generated. So they look like real people, but it's just someone making tens of thousands of dollars just by creating this kind of images on social media. Then they'll try and like get their point of view on certain topics out into social media just based off of that. Never show their face though.
Right, so people, basically bots are being created in social media land and they're actually making money off of them, which is pretty crazy. Getting so many followers as they share a particular view, and trying to espouse that view to the world. Skepticism in social media, I think, should be crazy high right now, if it's not already. Or just leave it altogether, which is my recommendation. Most people are will. But be skeptical, because there is a lot of ability to fake things. And if I can begin to get a fake message across and believe, and I can influence behaviors because of that, I win, right? And if you can do that at a mass scale, that's pretty powerful. What else?
It makes the ability to write like malware and stuff more accessible, so it could put more volume out into like a world with like people who could write malicious code, like put them on these thumb drives to get into other systems. So it does make like the incentive to be able to do that so much more widely spread than it was before.
Right, so this threat of bringing down the level of technical knowledge it takes to write malicious software. Yeah, I actually asked it to write some software for me the other day just to test how well it did, and I was impressed by what you can do with some very simple prompts. And I know enough to look at it and say, yeah, I think that would work. I didn't actually try it, but it was very, very impressive. And if you put that in the hands of someone who has ill intent, the risk, but the benefit, you know, if you're in the organization, you just became a much more efficient coder, right? So there are these trade-offs with these technologies. Let me share with you another one that maybe you didn't necessarily think of. That is a risk that organizations are perceiving with generative AI. So I was at a conference where they had a keynote speaker, and I forget the name of the organization he works for now, but he was one of the people who was part of the team at Google that started Gmail. So someone who's done some pretty cool things and is now off doing some other cool things. And he was talking about generative AI and kind of what he was seeing as the conversations he was having out there. One of the things that he said is a lot of these AI models are based on a large language model, right? Where they are seeded by the entirety of the internet, if you will, right? A huge, huge host of stuff, which requires A, a lot of processing power, and B, it gets fed all this information, it gets larger and larger all the time. And it's owned by somebody else. So many organizations don't actually feel like they need to pay for that processing power to have such a large language learning model. They want small language models that are focused towards what it is that they do. And so not as inclusive. So part of it is, you know, are we paying for too much? The other thing was the whole, who is taking my data, who has my data, how do I protect my data? There are some organizations, many organizations that says, do not use ChatGPT because it's going to be a violation of security policies, or if you do, make sure you're sure that you're not giving out any confidential information. But the one that resounded with me was organizations are sick of paying what they refer to in this presentation as the Microsoft tax. The Microsoft tax being every month, they get to write a check to Microsoft for the number of people that are using Office 365, whatever all these products are, and they don't own the software anymore. There used to be a day and age where you'd go to the bookstore and you would buy a box and it would have CDs in it, and then they became DVDs, and you actually owned Microsoft Office. Now, you pay Office 365 either a monthly basis or an annual basis, and that's how you get Microsoft's products. And there are some benefits to that. You don't have to update it, and they take care of updating and all those things. But it's actually been a huge revenue stream for Microsoft, and organizations are not excited about signing up for another one. So they see a risk of this generative AI, this ChatGPT, where it's going, as in order for them to use it, are we going to have to be paying an enormous sum of money in order to get this technology? And so how do we, from are there open source alternatives? Are there ways that we can actually have this running, side of our premises and not out there on Microsoft servers and so forth? So one of the risks being is this a drastic increase in how much money is going to get sucked out of our balance sheet every year? All right. So when organizations look at securing things, they want to deal with security, or they base security on one of three things. Either confidentiality, how do we keep that information from going to those people who should not have it? Integrity, how do I know that the data that I have is good and as reliable as what it should be? Right? It's the idea that when I open my checkbook and I log on to my bank, if I expect I have $1,000 and I see that I only have $100 because a transaction went through for significantly more than it should have, that data lost its integrity, right? Thankfully, that doesn't happen with our banks, at least not that I hear of all too often. They've done a pretty good job of ensuring the data is what the data is. And the last of which is availability. One of the greatest ways you can have secure data is to just not connect it to the internet. Well, what's the problem with that? Yeah. Your limit is I can't get to it. And so maybe that is, it's so secure that me only being able to get to it when I sit down on that computer to get to it would be great. But a lot of the benefits, a lot of the things, a lot of the reasons why we use computers is because I can access this and it's available whenever I want it, wherever I want it. And that's this world of cloud computing that we live in. So anytime there is a security attack, it is attacking on at least one of these three particular tenants. It's either trying to get access to something that it shouldn't have. It's trying to change the value of what is there so it represents something else, or it's trying to take down availability, right? If I do a ransomware attack, familiar with a ransomware attack? Or I come in and I encrypt what's on your computer, and if you don't pay me some money, you're never getting it back. What are they doing in that case? These three tenants, what are they, maybe it's multiple, but what are they? They're taking away the ability. It's not available to you. Therefore, you may very well want to give me money. One of the largest places, most often places that ransomware attacks occur is in the healthcare sector. Why? What?
Personal information.
Well, it is personal information, but why would they be the most apt to pay? Because a hacker doesn't really care if they took you down or didn't take you down. They want money in their bank.
Because HIPAA will make you, the healthcare provider, responsible.
Yeah, the healthcare process, we're getting there. Yeah.
Because the data that they need, they actually need to keep people alive and healthy, so that the risk for them if they don't get the data back is higher.
Exactly. A hospital's job is to keep you alive, is to provide you with medical care. And in order to do that, we need to have those charts. And it used to be, there were paper charts, and they would have them in filing cabinets, and you could pull them out, and they were hard, and you could touch them. And then we had this really great idea that we should make everything electronic. It would just simplify things and make life so much better, which isn't wrong. But when ransomware attacks occur, when all that gets encrypted, and I can no longer say, this person's allergic to penicillin, I shouldn't give it to them. And all of a sudden I'm trying to decide if that's what I need to do to save their life. I may actually inadvertently cause them harm, which is exactly what a hospital doesn't want to do. Therefore, they are a huge target and can't afford the time to try to rebuild their system from backups or do any of these other things that might make that available some other way. So because of that availability and lack thereof and the importance of that being available, it becomes a pretty big target. So one of the things hospitals should do is to step back and say, what can we do? What decisions can we do to lower our vulnerability of being exposed to a ransomware attack? Because the likelihood of it happening has been going up over the course of every year for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And the amount of cost, the impact it's doing is very high. So huge, huge reasons to invest in doing that. From a confidentiality perspective, this is the whole idea that I steal information, right? If you have a, say, a access point on your network that has a default password on it, and someone comes in and all of a sudden they're able to see and to take every single credit card number that's going through your organization's network and then go and buy what they want on eBay, right? You have a confidentiality problem. You should figure out where that is. How do we ensure that we have changed passwords? We have locked things down in such a way to where someone can't get in and steal that information and then compromise us that way. So a lot of these things are going to, these conversations are going to come down to these three things, and how do we ensure that these don't happen? So as I was talking about ransomware, one of the things I mentioned was the whole idea of the impact, the cost is going up. We're becoming more and more vulnerable to the threat of ransomwares. And so that ultimately leads to a risk. This whole idea, this risk number is going higher. So what organizations are going to do is they're actually going to take time to sit back and evaluate what are the different threats, what are the different vulnerabilities, what's the impact these things are having, and they will come up with a risk register that will identify all the different things that they can do. Because at the end of the day, there are going to be more threats and vulnerabilities that an organization needs to address than they probably have the budget to address. So once they have taken and gone through this process of identifying all these different things, then they can come back and say, all right, we have a $1 million budget this year. Where should we spend it? How should we invest it? Now, if I told you with your $1 million, that if you invested $1 million you could save $2 million. Is that a good investment? You spend $1 million, but you're gonna save from whatever, you're gonna save 2 million. So I spend $1 million to save 2. Is that a good investment? I see a lot of head nods. It sounds like a trick question. In a vacuum, that is the right answer, right? I can spend this $1 million, I can save 2 million. But what if I have a series of 10 other projects, each of which that cost me $100,000? But they would each save me $300,000. Now where do I spend my $1 million? On the one project that would save me 2 million, or on the cumulative 10 projects that would in cumulative save me 3 million? Maybe the 3 million. Again, we're gonna say maybe, because again, A, they're guesstimates. You don't know perfectly what's gonna happen. These are best case guesses. And 2, there may be an argument to be made that that one investment for $1 million might be so important that we have to do that one, right? There may be regulatory rules, right? The government may say, no, you have to do this one. So there's all sorts of things that then come into this conversation, but at least you're having the conversation around dollars and cents, as opposed to, I feel the best about this one. I really, really like this one. That's not always the best argument for why you should do things, but you would be surprised how often that particular argument makes its way into the conversation. That it's somebody's pet project and they just really, really like it. If you can get to something that's more quantitative and hard in numbers, at least when you push it up the ladder of conversations and you get to the final decision makers, they very often are driven by the dollars and cents. So then, as part of this process, we're never going to rest on the fact that says, we have looked at this risk, we have assessed this risk, and we said, okay, we're good. We're going to do this assessment, and we're going to say, okay, here's the risk we've identified, here's how we evaluated, where's the impact. Then we're going to do something about it. We're going to mitigate that risk. We're going to find a potential solution. We're going to put it into place. We may do it by avoiding the risk altogether. We're just not going to use generative AI in the workplace. We're just going to avoid it. No, not allowed. We're going to put things so any of our computers are going to block it. Maybe we're going to mitigate the risk. We're going to do something to reduce that impact of that risk. Making some changes. We may just accept the risk and be like, you know what, it's the wild, wild west, and there's not a whole lot we're going to do, and we don't think it's that expensive for us, or we can't afford to do anything about it anyway, so we're just going to accept that risk. You might transfer that risk. What's that called? Risk transference. There's another name for that. You guys do this every time you up your, when you're driving your car and you have to pay every 6 months or a year. What do you buy? Insurance, right? What are you doing? You're basically saying, if I got into an accident, there's enough risk there that I don't want to have to eat paying for a new car for myself, for the other person involved, for the loss of life, whatever those things are. So you buy insurance, which transfers that risk to someone else. So if something bad happens, ultimately somebody else will pay those expenses. Interestingly, in the world of cyber, buying cyber insurance is getting to be very difficult because it's hard to quantify exactly what the loss will be. And there have been a lot of insurance companies that have lost a lot of money because they did not assess what that risk level was at a high enough space. I've heard in the last year, this is starting to get better. It ebbs and it flows. So there are times where it's nearly impossible to buy it. And now insurance companies are figuring out how to price their product and to set things up in a way to where it works. But what you're doing when you buy that is you're saying, you know what, there are some things I can't control for. There are things I don't know that are going to happen. I'm going to transfer that risk to someone else so they'll step in and help me. One of the things that I found very interesting when I was talking to a company, Starbucks no longer buys cyber insurance and other types of insurance, and they're self-insured because they found that two things happen when they ultimately put in an insurance claim. Is one, they lose control of the process of how they do things because the insurance companies want to come in and tell you how to do stuff. And two, they found it actually was way, way more expensive for them to be paying for the insurance than to just handle the things themselves. So organizations will look at those things and say, you know what, at some level, what they're saying is it's better for us to accept that risk and to just deal with it ourselves and use our own financial resources than it is to buy that insurance and to transfer that risk elsewhere. And experience, sets that up for them. And then you'll evaluate, you look at it over and over again, continuing to do these risk assessments. How well is it going? And then making sure that you're staying compliant with regulations. So the government is, whether it's the legislature, they don't oftentimes write laws that affect this. Sarbanes-Oxley is one good example when they did. But oftentimes, new regulatory compliance will come out of the FEC, the SEC, any of these organizations that have the power to basically say, if you're in the financial industry, here's some new compliance rules that you need to put into place. The government's giving them access to that, or permission to write those things. So we need to be paying attention to that and ensuring that we are in compliance with what those new rules are. Otherwise, they could fine us, we could get in trouble, so on and so forth. And the process continues, right? So there are in organizations, departments that spend their life doing these very things. All right, I've got 4 minutes left. So with that, are there questions? Yeah.
As cybersecurity gets more complex, and you're talking about like insurance, cybersecurity being challenging, how do you think risk management or risk mitigation charts and plans are going to look? Are they going, do you think they're going to be like increasingly complex and challenging to try and plan out for best case?
I don't necessarily think so. In some ways, I think it's more the same. It's just a different thing, right? So you're always learning, there's always things that are different, but that's always been the case, right? As technology advances and so forth. So I don't think it'll get to the point where it's impossible and it's more complex. I just think it'll be changing, it'll be different. They're continuously reevaluating. And then I go, one of the examples I like to use is, I remember a day and age where I used to have to click a button every time I wanted my malware software to update, right? And that was an important thing that I did. Well, technology has advanced to a point where we don't expect humans to do that anymore, right? So we're changing the nature of things, and we're always going to be seeing that as technology advances, and things will get better, more complicated, more streamlined, but then different challenges arise.
So several companies, especially several tech companies, have developed their own version of OpenAI just for their own internal use, especially several high-tech firms. How do those firms that develop their own OpenAI forums, how do they manage the risks associated with that AI?
I can't specifically answer that question because I don't know, but it would be similar to this process that we look at, where they're assessing what's going on and addressing the threats that they have risen to the top as those the most important to deal with. They're implementing them, and then they're evaluating, right? Oh, we didn't notice that before. This thing changed, or now it crept up to the top because other things have become better. And then they go through that same process again. So with any technology, whether it's OpenAI or, open source AI or, just having desktops on the computer, right here, we're going to be evaluating all the time and regularly seeing where are the places that we need to improve, where are the places we need to do something. Sometimes things rise to the occasion that they have to be dealt with right now. Or you guys see headlines periodically that say a 0-day attack happened, and you should probably update your iPhone, you should probably update your Microsoft Windows account because it happened now and you could be vulnerable to this thing. So it's paying attention to it the exact same way you would any other software and going through the exact same process. That's why they make it fairly systematic. They've got a defined way of how organizations will ensure that they're paying attention to these different risks, the threats, how high is that impact, and then what can we do about it? How can we make some changes to fix that? All right, time for one more question if there is one. All right, yeah.
Sorry, so a small comment again.
Yeah, go for it.
Mickey, you never owned Microsoft Office. You paid for a lifetime license to use in the old things when you had the disks.
Fair enough.
Because they didn't want you to own it because there are liability laws. So it's a license to use, and in that license, end user license agreement that nobody ever read except me. It said that if something went wrong, cut.
Yeah.
That couldn't sue them, you could, it was your fault if you lost the data, whatever. So.
Yeah, no, yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
business model,
Yep.
again, their risk, they said, hey, if we do this.
Yeah, but interestingly, just, there was a perception by consumers that they did own it. And so, perceptions matter a little bit. But I remember when I was, an undergrad, I had friends, never me, I had friends, who were a part of what they called the Ahoy Mateys Club, where you had a friend who would give you a burned copy of their CDs, and you could share software very, very easily because it didn't even go online to validate you had a good access code, and people could share software in ways to where it felt like you did own it. But if you talk to a lawyer, you would find out very quickly you never did.
It was interesting, in the early nineties, Intel had a bug on their microprocessor, a divide by three in a certain format was wrong. People demanded they replace this, they sent back copies of the microprocessor to replace it in their machines and everything, so Windows could, blue screen more efficiently. Nobody sent back a copy of Windows and said, you gotta fix this, it keeps crashing on me. Intel lost millions of dollars, Microsoft nothing. And because for some reason it was okay for software to crash back then. Not as much now.
I got a blue screen today for the first time in a really long time. I don't know, it's like, I have not seen that in a long time, but, yeah. But that's one of the things that I would actually, as I think about this world we enter, of generative AI, and I say this because you see a lot of hysteria, if you will, of people saying the world is ending, right? Life as we know it is gonna be different, the jobs are all gonna be changing. They'll be different. Jobs are going to be different, but I don't think it's the end of the world as we know it. I think there's new opportunities and new challenges, and we just have to figure out how do we utilize these tools to add value and to do things. So I get more excited than I do fearful over the coming technologies. At one point, I think it was about 1999, 2000. People thought that the internet was going to destroy the world, and socially, you might say it has, right? But no, it's actually created a different world, right? And there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of empowerment that's gone on because now people have access and different things. So what does that look like as we have these other new technologies? I don't know, but I'd much rather be a part of the conversation than put my head in the sand and say, yeah, I shouldn't go to work anymore because my value doesn't matter anymore. But I don't think that's true in any way, shape, or form. So encourage you guys, look for that opportunity. How do you take advantage of new technologies, and where will we be 20 years from now? Definitely not the same place we are today. All right, thank you. I'm not sure what's next, Bernie.
Great.
All right.
Very much.